as an I. So it's been a minute, but I am back, okay? And I hope you guys are enjoying the new series that I kind of started, Bible Study 2.0. I still have not, decided on a particular time frame because everyone mentioned a time that's different. So it's hard to determine consensus. But anywho, I am Goddess Akasha, and for today I'm starting a new series, okay? And I'm calling it the Matriarchy Series because I feel it's imperative for us to know what a matriarchy is and what we're heading into, especially with the fact that I am advocating for said matriarchy, right? I feel like there's an ongoing conversation about whether we're in a matriarchy now, whether we should have a matriarchy, whether we shouldn't, whether it's the same as a patriarchy, right? So really and truly, I'm going to just do a deep dive into all of these things and answer all these questions. So by the end of the series, you should be able to determine whether we're in one now, whether we should go to one, whether we shouldn't, whether it's a good idea, whether it's not a good idea, that whole thing, okay? So I have some notes here. And for this first video, I'm going to just define the terms, okay? So what is a matriarchy? Let's just start from the beginning, okay? Let's start with matriarch, right? In order to understand what a matriarchy is, as in the society, we have to understand what a matriarch is, right? So matriarch, this is mother or woman who heads a family or tribe, and this is circa 1600. So this is when the term pretty much came about, okay? So this term is split up between two different root words. So matri, which is Latin, which means mother or woman, and arch, which is Greek, which means to rule, okay? So this term arch, it comes from Archean, okay? So I'll put the word in the video so you can see the spelling, which came from archon. Now archon was, at the time, it was a chief. So let me see, archon is a chief magistrate of Athens. So this was in the 1650s. To be the first, thence to begin from or with, and to make preparation for, also to rule, lead the way, govern, rule over, or be the leader of. So really and truly, archon has two meanings, actually. So it not only tells you that it is about a ruler or a leader, but it also tells you the reason why something should be in the lead or something should be able to govern. It means it came first, or it is in preparation to, right? So the definition of matriarchy is debated amongst anthropologists, okay? Some feel it is an inverse of patriarchy, while others disagree and feel it is a whole other system entirely. But really and truly, what I like to do is take my own path of determining what this word actually means, which is why I'm breaking it down into its etymology. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys my understanding and my definition of what a matriarchy is. And what we're going to do is we're going to test some societies to see what makes a matriarchy. So it's not just, blanket labeling of a society. It's more of utilizing a critical system to determine whether the society meets all requirements to be considered a matriarchy, right? So if I were to ask you what makes a matriarchy, what would you say? I'm sure the main thing you said was, oh, matrilineal, as in, the daughters inherit from their mothers, blah, 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 blah. And I feel like that's the main answer. But a lot of times there is this discussion around whether a society can be matrilineal and be matriarchal, or whether matrilineal makes a society matriarchal. So let me define these terms so we can kind of understand what we're talking about. Usually when you're looking into what a matriarchy is, you come across a couple of terms: matrifocal, matrilineal, and what's the other word? I forgot. Oh, and matrilocal. I totally forgot. Matrifocal, matrilocal, and matrilineal. So we're going to define these and see what they really mean. So matrifocal is an adjective. So that means it's a descriptive word. This started in 1952 in reference to families or households when the mother has responsibility and authority. Okay. So focal, the term focal is Latin. This means, or it was focalis, right? It means of or pertaining to a focus. So this word is often means matricentric. So because the mother is the focal point, she is the center, she is the hub, kind of like Big Mamas, right? Then we have matrilocal. So matrilocal is also an adjective, and this began in 1897. So this is actually a more an older word, okay? This is applied to the custom in certain social groups for a married couple to settle with the wife's home or community. So after a couple gets married and the man moves in with her house or in her village. So this is what matrilocal means. Next we have matrilineal, okay? So matrilineal that word came out in 1897, and this means pertaining to or descended from the mother's side. So the key word here is lineal, which is Old French, and an Old French word is lineus, and it basically means pertaining to a line, so as in your bloodline, okay? With these three elements, this is how you determine whether a society is matriarchal or not, right? Now, this is also the reason why a lot of anthropologists are perplexed, because these particular systems or customs do not indicate a hierarchy. So a lot of times they would misclassify a society as egalitarian. So, but at the end of the day, if you have all of these three things, that would mean that the social culture is determined by the mother's lens, which is what matriarchy is, right? So, but it doesn't necessitate a hierarchy. Okay, so when people mention cooperation, communal living, shared power, things like that, what they're talking about is not really what makes a matriarchy, but what they're talking about is basically how a society is impacted by a particular system. So those are basically symptoms showing you the result of them living by a certain, status quo. I'll be losing my words. So these particular characteristics are not what make or determine or define a matriarchy, but they are symptoms of the matriarchy, if that makes sense. Almost like trauma is not what makes a patriarchy, but it is an inherent symptom of that system being in place for those people. So we have to focus on just what determines what a matriarchy is. And this is important because before we get to whether we're in one or not, we have to be able to identify what makes a society matriarchal or not. So we're going to do a little exercise, and we are going to look at some societies which have been classified as matriarchal in one article or another, and we are going to determine based upon whether they exhibit all three of these elements. And then we can decide whether the society is matriarchal or not, because most times every society doesn't have all three of these elements. Some have them, some have some of them, some have all of them, so it just depends. And you'll see. So I ended up making a chart, right? And I just added a couple of societies, and we're going to go over whether they encompass these elements, okay? So number one, we have the Minangkabau. So this is a society in Indonesia, okay? So are they matrifocal? Yes, as in the mother is the focal point of the home and the community, okay? Are they matrilineal? Do they pass down things through the mother's line? Yes, okay? Matrilocal, when they get married, do the husbands move into the mother's house or in her community? Yes, okay? So far, the Minangkabau has all three elements. So let's go to number two, the Kasi of India. Matrifocal, check. Matrilineal, check. Matrilocal, check. Next, the Musuo of China. Okay. Matrifocal, yes. Matrilineal, yes. And matrilocal, yes. Okay. So we have the Bribri in Costa Rica. So this is an indigenous tribe which exists mostly untouched by modern society. So let's see. They're matrifocal, they're matrilineal, but they're not matrilocal. People tend to live wherever they live after they get married. It's not a organized system where as soon as a woman gets married, the man moves into her house. Okay, so that's important. So they're missing the last element. Next is the Arkan in Ghana. Okay, people like to reference this a lot. So we have matrifocal. This is something that's undetermined. Okay, so I put a maybe. You know what I mean? I think it's important to determine how a society basically acted before colonization and after colonization. So we would have to dig deeper in that, but it's more of a sometimes type situation, basically. So are they matrilineal? Yes, absolutely. And then are they matrilocal? So no, they tend to live wherever after they get married. The Trobiando, hopefully I'm saying it right. I'm probably saying it wrong. Trobian Islanders, right? Of Papua New Guinea, okay? They are sometimes matrifocal. They are matrilineal, but they are not matrilocal, okay? Now, the Cherokee of North America. They are matrifocal, matrilineal, and matrilocal. The Hopi of North America, which is another indigenous tribe. Honestly, most of the indigenous tribes that are in North America and the United States kept their traditions of women having, you know, power in society and value. You know what I mean? They mostly kept it. So the Hopi, they are matrifocal, matrilineal, and matrilocal as well. Then we have the Karen in Burma. Okay, so they are sometimes matrifocal. They're not matrilineal, but they are matrilocal. Okay, so the husband does move in with the woman's family, but they are patrilineal. Okay, the Bisago in Guinea-Bissau. Okay, so I actually have a link to some of these. So you guys, if you want, you can watch a documentary, a short documentary of some of these. I linked the Bisago documentary in my description, as well as the Musuo and the next society that I'm about to name. Okay, so the Bisago is matrifocal, as in the mothers are centered in that society. They are sometimes matrilineal. They're big on ancestor worship, and they're not matrilineal. Matrilocal, I mean. They're not matrilocal, okay? So the next society is Estonian Islands, okay? So the island of Kinu in Europe. Okay, so this particular society is a bunch of women who basically do everything. But the reason why they do everything is because the men are absent. It's not that the men are there. The men are absent because of sailing culture. So the women are now left to kind of do everything. So it's more of a default matriarchy, if you will. So they're matrifocal because they're the only ones that's there, but they're not matrilineal or matrilocal because the men just aren't in the society. Hopefully that makes sense. Then we have the Umoja in Kenya. Okay, so they're matrifocal. They're not matrilineal or matrilocal. Okay. So really and truly, if we were to judge these societies about based off of this criteria, do they embody all three elements of what makes a society matriarchal? Are they matrifocal, matrilineal, and matrilocal? So far, which societies have all three is the Minangkabau, the Khasi in India, the Masuo in China. Actually, let me take that back. I'm sorry. I'm reading it wrong. So this is the Minangkabau in Indonesia, the Masuo in China, the Cherokee, the Hopi in North America. Yeah, that's about it. That's about it. The rest of these societies have one or two elements, but it does not make this society matriarchal, okay? So they have, they're either matrifocal or they're matrilineal, but not many of them have all three elements, okay? So the very next thing that I want to determine is what role do the men play in these societies? Are they discarded? Can they have any type of role of power or authority? Or are they second-class citizens? When it comes to the Minangkabau, the men act as clan representatives and religious leaders, especially because of Islamic influence. So that would be a yes. The men do have positions of power. For the Khasi of India, the men often serve as village chiefs and political spokespersons. So they also have men in leadership positions. So we have the Masuo in China. Do the men have any type of power? And this is commonly misunderstood because just because the women hold majority power, people think that men don't have power, but really and truly they do. The men are reserved for political affairs while the women run the society itself, like the community, the celebrations, the customs, just different things like that. The women hold majority power, but when it comes to politics, the men are in government. For the Bribri in Costa Rica, the men often serve as spiritual leaders. They're called Awa. Hopefully I'm saying that right. They're called Awa. Okay. And really and truly, I wish that when it comes to the Bribri, we can kind of, I wish they were a bigger society so we can tell whether, like, who would be in the government, whether it would be women in the government or men in the government or men that women put in the government, because that's a totally different thing too. But when we're dealing with indigenous tribes, they usually do not have a United Nations recognized nation, so therefore they don't have a formal government. It's more of an indigenous tribe. They are sovereign in their own right. So then we have the Akan in Ghana. Okay, so the men are able to have positions of power. You have chiefs and kings, which is Ohene, and they are chosen by queen mothers. Okay, so that also means that the queen mothers have the ability to take those positions of power away from them if they're not serving appropriately. So then we have the Trobiano Islanders from Papua New Guinea, and they also have chiefs and ritual leaders, and also the men are in the government as well. So far we're seeing a pattern of men being in certain positions of leadership in these societies. Number 7, the Cherokee, they usually have war chiefs. Number 8 is the Hopi. They have religious officials and village leaders, which could be men. So 9 is Karen Burma. They actually have a patriarchal governance in many subgroups. So the Basago in Guinea-Bissau, they have male governance. So the women are not in the government. So 11, like I said, the men are absent due to sailing all the time. So they're not there to be in positions of leadership. They're kind of doing trade routes and things like that. So the women kind of do everything. So number 12 is the Umoja in Kenya. Now this is an intentional feminist society. So there's no men allowed in the village at all. So this is an intentional separatist society. That's how it's classified. So this is intentionally gynarchical. Okay, so we're going to get into that word and what that means as well. I think it's interesting to look at all these different types of, preconceived matriarchies, whether they are fully matriarchal or they contain an element of what a matriarchy could be, and just see how each of them are expressed, especially the very last one, which is an intentional separatist community, where it is more of a gynarchical refuge rather than a matriarchy. And the reason why it doesn't fall within the category of matriarchy is because it doesn't have anything to do with bloodline. So there's no matrilineal aspect to this society. Women go there because they have experienced trauma and abuse, so they go there to get away from men intentionally. There's a lot of discussion that women are having around this. Like, people tend to use the word matriarchy, but then they describe this. So I'm going to get into that in a second. But I just want to make sure we understand exactly what we're talking about and we're using the correct terminology for what we're trying to describe. What we have learned thus far is that men holding certain positions of power does not negate the woman's power, right? You see how in the patriarchy, men have power and then women are second-class citizens. They didn't have the ability to vote or own property or do anything on their own. And for a woman to be beaten was normal life, like to correct your wife, that was normal. Like, you know what I'm saying? In these particular societies, we don't really see that aspect of men being second-class citizens or women beating men just because it's normal. Like, that's not what we see in these particular societies. And I think in order for us to have a proper conversation, we have to be able to know what we're talking about through observation, right? Not just speaking from our thoughts, because then the conversation has no foundational basis in anything factual or realistic. I want to give an official definition of matriarchy, because just saying women rule is the reason why a lot of people mistakenly think that a matriarchy is just an inverted patriarchy, right? It basically negates the fact that power can look different, right? And again, the reason why is because the word matriarchy was a subset or adopted from the word patriarchy, which is why it started in the 1600s. You got to understand something. This really shows us exactly who is the one, writing our history, giving us our basic understanding of reality, life, and society. We are learning from a particular lens. This is why we have certain words. Notice the origin of these roots in these words were from where? The Latin. It was from Rome. It was from Greece and France. Okay, so we have these words that come from these particular languages: Latin, Greek, and French. So really and truly, this gives us an insight into what we're talking about when we speak English, right? It gives us certain connotations behind the words, even if it's not fully describing exactly what one thing is. So this is why we have to do a deeper dive into what something is besides just looking at the word itself, because the word itself can be misleading, being that the origin of the word was given to us by people with a limited perception of reality. And that's just how I'm going to say it. I'm not going to say anything else about that. So the official definition of matriarchy, get your pens and write this down, okay? So I have a formal definition and I have an expanded definition. You do what you want to do with each one of them, whatever, okay? So the formal definition of matriarchy. Matriarchy is a social system organized around the mother as the central axis of society, wherein lineage, inheritance, moral authority, and social continuity are determined through women, while political or ritual leadership may be exercised by men without overriding female-centered social power. Okay, so this definition is more accurate. And doesn't it paint a better picture of what a matriarchy is? If you were to imagine what that is, women rule or mother governs versus what I just said, don't they paint two different pictures? So this is the expanded version. Matriarchy is a matricentric social order in which mothers function as the primary stabilizing force of family, community, and culture. In matriarchal societies, descent is traced through the maternal line, households are centered around women, and postmarital residence commonly favors the woman's kin group. Political leadership, when present, is often delegated to men by women or exists alongside women's authority rather than above it. So, this is even more clear. to tell you exactly what a matriarchy is. So from this point, there shouldn't be any more confusion. But that is part one of the series of basically getting an understanding, a deeper understanding of what a matriarchy is. Now we can have the conversation of whether we're in one, whether we need one, whether it's, you know, a feasible thing to do or not feasible, if it's realistic, if it's not realistic. All of the conversation now can be had once everybody knows exactly what it is. Okay? So until next time, I will see you all soon. And remember to worship the yoni. Much love.